Hello and welcome to episode 8 of WB40 with me, Matt Valentine, and Chris Weston. Hello Chris, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, Matt. How are you?
Yep, it's been an action-packed week and action-packed weekend with far too many family commitments for one weekend. So it's one of those weekends where I just felt like I needed a weekend after it to be able to recover in that kind of, and this isn't even Christmas yet kind of way.
Well, it might not be Christmas, but that's what I've been doing this weekend. I've had to put Christmas lights up, and I've already eaten more than my fair share of mince pies and all Christmas type of accoutrement. So I'm looking forward to being about a stone heavier by the end of the month.
Fantastic. You're putting that weight on just to be able to get through the cold months. I'm also looking forward to being able to put some jingle bells onto the WB40 theme tune for the festive period.
Absolutely. I am very much looking forward to our review of the year and see if we can keep our strength up during that whole thing.
Yeah, a review of 2016 is going to be fairly hard work, isn't it? But that's next week. This week we're going to be talking about recruitment in the tech industry and some thinking about where recruitment might be going over the next few years. So, Chris, this week you were doing some blogging and you were thinking about some of the weird things that go on within the world of recruitment.
Well, that's right. I was talking to a recruiter at an event this week. The kind of people that he was interested in were only those people that weren't looking for a job, which struck me as slightly in its logic. And I wrote the blog really to explore that theme and explore the way really that recruiters try to come up with some differentiator or special that they're different from everybody else. And why are they doing that? And I guess recruitment as a whole is suffering in the same way as a lot of businesses. It's the disintermediation effect of things like LinkedIn is undoubtedly having its impact on that business, and recruiters do have to think about how they are adding value and how they are different to their customers' requirements. So yeah, I wrote that blog and it got quite a lot of engagement so far. It's only been up a few days, but quite a few recruiters that I know have commented on it, and most have been fairly kind and haven't wanted me for it, which is good. But some of the thinking that I went on later on in that post was really about what does a recruitment platform look like nowadays? How do you envisage a piece of software or even just a network that allows the strategic requirements of customers to be matched and to link with the aspirations of people who are in the market? Because a lot of that doesn't seem to happen. It seems to be that most roles are filled through a list of skills that are required and a list of things that you can do, and these things are then matched up. There's a lot less around the more valuable end of things and what really makes us tick. So it's it's an interesting one for me at the moment. I'm working with a recruitment company as well to try to understand how we can improve that whole piece.
It does feel like an industry like many other kind of knowledge-based industries that is trapped in ways of doing things because that's the way they've always done things. And I've had a number of conversations over the last 3 years or so with a number of recruitment companies, not as a candidate, but actually talking to them about how they might be able to go about thinking about things differently. And it's innovators' dilemma challenge again, because they have dwindling but still solid revenue coming from the ways of working, which is based on a percentage fee for placing people into roles that may or may not be the roles that organisations need. Very much on the idea of people having one job at the same, at any given time and completely devoting themselves to one organisation, and trying to get them to think about things in a different way. I've found for the most part incredibly hard. But maybe no more hard than it is for a established, I don't know, technology vendor in one particular space that's about to get disrupted, trying to get them to think differently about things. It's, you know, no more different than trying to get Kodak to think about digital as important rather than silver-based film. So it's that innovator's dilemma space. However, I have found a few people, and we're going to hear from a couple of them tonight, which is good. And there's two people I spent some time with this week. The first is a lady called Katrina Collier, who is a specialist in using social for helping in-house recruiters to be able to broaden out the way in which they approach finding the skills and the talent that they need to get to. She comes from a background of working with quite deep technology skills, so finding developers and the like, and talk with her, as you'll hear, about the way in which she helps her clients to be able to develop new skills and new ways of trying to be able to reach out into the employment market to find people that they need. And then the second person is a guy called Pat Lyons, who set up a business about a year ago. And again, he's looking at a different sector. He's looking at more experience, change, and strategic consulting type skills, but again looking at how he can take new approaches and very network based approaches to be able to get the right people together to be able to help his clients when they need it. And it's been interesting just to be able to explore some of these things with people who are taking a different approach to it.
Okay, Matt, so you interviewed Katrina Collier recently about her approach to recruitment and how she's working with companies to use social media, etc. So let's hear from her.
Hi, I'm Katrina Collier. I'm a social recruiting expert, which means that I teach companies how to recruit their staff on social media, and I'm very honoured to travel the globe doing that. My background, though, and where it's relevant to this audience, is I have about 10 years of technical recruitment experience as well, and I do spend a lot of my time training companies how to headhunt technical people out directly themselves.
So what was the thing that got you to make the shift from being a traditional recruiter? What were the things that you saw that meant that you said, no, I'm going to do this a different way?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was working in a particular recruitment agency, which became very unprofessional, which goes against my complete value set, and then the recession hit, and suddenly I wasn't running all those beautiful IT contractors, which meant I was on rolling commission and stuck, so I could move. And then it was, well, hang on a minute. If I'm sitting here using LinkedIn to recruit, why don't I just teach this? Now, that was 2009, and to be honest, it was too early. Then I got pulled in-house for 18 months and built a ClickView consultancy up. Again, you know, it was a new technology at that point. I needed them to work to billions of rows of data and all this kind of stuff. It was tough. But I saw that I could do it, and I could do it directly myself, and that I had the upper hand by doing that. And then I came out and started teaching after that, because I love empowering recruiters to do it better, and particularly in the HR in-house, the technical space. I love that the most.
So the core of what you're doing is basically it's effectively cutting out a swathe of traditional recruitment machine. In
many respects, yes. And when you're in something like technical recruitment, where these guys are they're avoiding in-house recruiters and agency recruiters because they're in such demand that they can. So therefore, if you're passing it on, actually it's a bit like, that game you played as a kid where you'd sort of say one thing. So the technical manager says to the HR manager, this is the job description, and it changes. By the time it's gone to the agency, it's changed again. And then you've got people not wanting to talk to them. So it's all this friction. So I'm kind of getting rid of the friction so people can approach directly.
And the sort of engagement that you'd have with a client, just talk me through.
Yeah, I mean, they can be nowhere. You'd be surprised. Sometimes they're like, I don't even have a personal Facebook account. You're like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So honestly, I've done complete dinosaurs to really quite savvy, what they call sources. So these guys go like right down into the dark web and and all sorts of stuff, scrape lists and do all sorts of naughty stuff. I've done the remit. But in general, my favorite place to be is in that HR in-house where they're starting the journey. And a lot of the time it is, okay, they might have a LinkedIn recruiter license. Of course, it's not delivering value. So because of the shortage of technical people. So it's getting them off. So it's like let me take your hand and just show you where else you can find people. So I'll very much sit one-to-one training. This is how you find people. This is how you present yourself. This is how you enter into the conversation. And of course, the big thing with me is I don't want you to just see Matt's corporate profile over here. I want you to be able to see all of the other places that you're having a conversation, so you get more of a well-rounded view, so that you use that in your communication. So it's not, we all get these silly emails like urgent PHP developer required, and you're kind of like, well, why would I open that? Where's the value to me? Whereas if you start your conversation with, I read your blog post, I can tell that your skills would be of value to our firm, or, what are your future career plans? That kind of a thing. It's a lot more personal.
What's the state of the skills of the in-house recruiter in terms of understanding the technology landscape these days? How well do they? How well are they able to talk about things that a developer might want to talk about?
Do you know what? It truly depends on the company. So there are a lot of tech managers who will not give their in-house recruiters the time of day, which is, I think, really short-sighted. And I apologize if I just offended anyone on your podcast. But they have to now. They need to sit with them and give them that education, even if it's just the initial stuff. Like I've been forever encouraging my recruiters, go and sit with the developers and say, okay, like, what does this do? What are you creating? Why is it you're here in the company? How are you paying it forward? I mean, I love what you were saying before we came on about these people are already valuable. How can we add value? So they need to find that stuff out. But I do see a lot of companies who go, okay, the recruiters are identifying the pool of people, but because we know these guys are in such short supply, they're actually asking their technical managers to make the approach. So and also when you've got sites like GitHub where I can actually put the code in front of you and you can go, is this good or not? So you can also do a bit of vetting at the same time. Again, that's just going to save you time. So how good are they in general? It depends on the company. It truly does, and whether they're pushed away or not. And I think there needs to be a little bit of patience as well from the tech teams to give, even though they're desperate to bring people on board, is give the recruiters the time to find people, just because they really are hiding. And I'm sure that, these guys are probably doing the same. They've turned off all their notifications and they just don't go into LinkedIn because every recruiter under the sun's there and things like that. So it takes time.
Do you find many former technical people working in-house?
A few, not many. No. There should be more.
Yeah.
There really should be more. It's really funny because you've said that, and we were talking about how chefs are also in short supply, which is completely not related. But actually, one of my clients has got a chef doing the recruitment because they can talk chef. So it's probably the same thing. Yes, there should be more of them, but there aren't. So
yeah, there's also that thing. I've worked in organisations where, over the last 15 years or so, something I've always done is involved the people who will be in the team in the recruitment process, and if it's a manager that I'm bringing in, involve the people who will be managed by that person in the recruitment process.
Yeah. And I do think there's been such a shift. I mean, I love this, like, we're recruiting in this age of transparency. And when I started out in my career, and I know you've heard that at my Disrupt HR talk, there's this tiny little advertisement in the newspaper for the job. And you didn't know if one person or 5,000 people applied. You didn't know if it was the only job or if there are thousands. So basically your boss could be a bastard and treat you really poorly. And of course, now it's not like that. So we've gone from these managers dictating what we shall do, real industrial mindset, to now they've got a lead. So by having the team interview the manager, you're going to get these lovely leaders, not dictators, kind of telling you what to do. And therefore, then you'll have this problem because people can go into Google and quickly discover how many other jobs are out there and they'll just take off because it is an employee market. It's theirs.
And essentially you talk there about this idea of the recruiting in the age of transparency. Maybe what you're doing at the moment is part of a reaction to much more systemic changes that are going on, not only about the way in which organisations recruit, but actually the very nature of the way in which we employ people. And it's particularly people with key talent or key skills?
Because the U economy, and the U economy isn't Uber. Yes, I think it's fabulous that Uber's there. I got one home last night, but that's not what I think it is. I think it's the likes of you and I who've gone, we have our specific skill set that we are really good at, really passionate about, so we're leaving. So we can go and deliver that into however many companies and work on a little project basis. And we can do that because technology has also enabled that. But it's given us visibility. I mean, I'll always say it wasn't that long ago that me as a one-person company couldn't supply a corporate because I wasn't Price Waterhouse. Because procurement would be saying you need to be Price Waterhouse delivering to us. And I'm like, but I'm just me. And now it doesn't matter because of the transparency, people can see that I know my stuff. They can see the recognition that I'm given from my clients. And that therefore they go, no, well, we want her. So it's kind of cut down a whole load of barriers that way as well. But I know we were also talking about, I still see that shift in the workforce going forward. We're about to lose the baby boomers. And then you're going to have, so that's going to leave corporate short of staff. And then you're losing all these people to the U economy because they're like, well, I can go off and do my thing because technology is enabling it. But those people will only want to deliver back to a firm that, again, when they can see it from the outside looking in, it's value driven, that match their values.
So where are the sorts of places, if you think specifically about developers,
yeah.
Where are the sorts of places where developers hang out? Where are the social? Because it doesn't.
Well, not LinkedIn. Because you must have seen the memes with like developer updates LinkedIn profile and gets chased down. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously they're on GitHub, Stack Overflow, great places to find them. But you've also got meetups. I mean, a ton of my friends are developers. They're all on Facebook. They're certainly on Twitter as well because they'll be chit-chatting. But what they're doing is they're hiding. So they're not writing, hi, I'm a PHP developer, come and recruit me. You've got to be really creative in how you find them and find their conversations. But they're certainly there. Of course they are. They're human. They want to interact with other people. But I'm also of the belief that recruiters shouldn't go and create a GitHub profile, for example. Use that as a starting point. To say, okay, I can see that specific developer is writing in that code. Okay, I don't necessarily understand that code, but I can at least do that. Run it past the manager. Yes, they're good. Great. Well, here are all like their Chrome extensions, which allow you to map across social networks, and then use those to do that conversation piece to find out more about them. And it could just be you start following them on Twitter and you engage with them for a bit. It could be Instagram, for goodness sake. There are so many developers on Instagram as well. Find those people, become known, liked and trusted by them because you're not a cowboy. You know your staff, you're talking, you're being very professional, interacting like you would in the pub, chit-chatting, human. Then you'll get to the people who are not on the internet, who are really hiding or are and they're sitting in the office, they're in teams. So they know if one of their mates wants to move as well. So if recruiters do the job right, if they're given that time, then they can bring in those people as well, which I think is really powerful.
It's interesting, that idea that actually, although you frame the way in which you present what you do a lot around social networks, actually it's much more about networks.
As well. And I don't have, so, you look at my Twitter and maybe it's 7,000. I truly don't know how many followers I have. It's not a huge network, but my network is right. So for me, my target is HR and in-house recruiters. So that, or I do the other side as well. I shouldn't say I don't, but I'm very careful about who I train on the other side. But so my following is those people, and so they pass my stuff on, and I chit chat with those people. So it's a small network, but I'm an influencer in that network because it's the right network. But yeah, it is networks. I mean, back in the day, I would have, Dad would have sent me to Uncle Rob and he'd have got me a job. Now we're just doing it on the internet. We're sort of saving time by doing that. And
about thinking about the way in which organisations sort of define the needs that they have. Before we came on air, talking about the challenges of, in a very logical way, particularly in technology organisations, I've seen people creating needs to be able to fill a slot in a very clever diagram, which actually has created a role that either can never exist because the skill sets required are just not compatible, or nobody would ever want to do, because the skill sets that are required, the actual work itself would bore the hell out of a person with those skills.
Mm.
Do you think that's changing?
No, it's still happening a bit. I think that's when the technical managers really need to listen to the recruiters, because they're the ones talking to the marketplace, and they'll be hearing back, well, one, we can't find them, or they'll talk to someone and go, oh, why would I want to do that? Like, how's that going to help me grow? Where's the value in that? How am I going to be challenged? Of course, there are people that want to go to work and be bored, but most of us like to do something we enjoy, because it's a lot of our day. So I guess it's hearing their feedback. But no, I still see where, the recession caused us all to consolidate. And even though, we're nearly in 2017 and that was 2008-9, there's still a lot of dual roles going on where people had to pick up other skills that don't necessarily match. And then they leave, and then they're going back to the marketplace saying, we want one of those. It's like, well, they don't exist. You created that. So
where do you see things developing over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I spoke at the in-house recruitment expo in January, and then the recruitment agency expo in February. And I was actually quite shocked at how far behind the agency side are, which is sort of scary if you are very reliant on them. Because, there's a lot of companies that do not have the bandwidth to recruit themselves. You do need to have a specific person doing it. So if you're too small and you have to rely on agencies, that kind of scared me. But they still have that black book, that sort of closed mentality of not sharing. Whereas the in-house recruiters actually really share. There's lots of conferences and lots of events going on, and they share information and knowledge. So in that respect, I think that they are actually ahead of the game in the social recruiting space. But as far as sort of changes, what I really see is going to happen, and going back to that age of transparency, I really do think the companies that are going to win are the ones where the CEO is quite public in social media. The hiring managers are quite public on social media. They're showing their expertise. They're showing their interest in their company. They're talking about what they're doing. And I think the more they come out from, their office onto the world of the internet, I think the more success. Because I just think it's that thing, you and I are on a call, I'm Googling. I'm pulling up Matt Ballantyne, then I'm going into each company to see where you've worked and what they're doing. And we're all doing that. It's all at our fingertips all the time. And we don't think about it at all when we're booking a holiday. We'll immediately go and read all the reviews. So it's the same kind of thing. But I mean more than Glassdoor. I mean the short videos, being approachable, being conversational. I see those companies winning in the future.
So are there any developments in the way in which technology is being used outside of social that you think are interesting for, particularly around technical recruitment?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to talk. It's sounding like I'm giving it a plug. Hung is an old colleague of mine, but Hung Lee, who's created Workshape.io, which is a very interesting tool for developers. And what's really lovely is it's completely locked down, so the likes of myself can't hack in and get to them. But where he's done it differently, you give a description. It's not just, they need 3 years of Java and 3 years of this or whatever. You're actually saying this is what the person will be doing in their role. And you kind of map it out, and it becomes a shape of how the job will look, be it it's architecture or whatever it might be. And then the developers that are coming onto the site are saying, okay, this is where my skills are. This is what I really want to be doing. So they're almost taking the next step. And then the shape of the job matches the shape of that person. And that's how you get in contact with them. And it's proving to be very, very effective for recruitment in this space specifically. So that's Workshape.io. Sadly, he's not giving me commission for saying that, but I just really love the product. It was the first time I sat and looked at something and went, wow, that's actually new. That's just not a job board. It's different. It's interesting. Because, why are we recruiting on what they've done? We should be looking at what they'd like to do as well. So this allows for that scope.
So interesting stuff from Katrina there, and it was a fascinating conversation. We might take some more from the interview. Again, we talked a lot more than the part that we heard there. I think one of the things that's come out really strongly, and actually you'll hear in the next interview as well, is this idea of the network being, and the open network being, the important part of how recruitment is going. And it's something that is being fed a bit by technology. I think that the traditional closed black book of the recruiter is not the valuable resource that maybe it once was for them.
Yeah, I think maybe that's trying to spike the guns of this whole thing before it happens, because people are becoming more connected, and the generation that are now coming through to the workforce are using technology to be connected to more and more people. So maybe that's a smart move. And I'm particularly way Katrina talks about CIOs taking to social media to explain why it is they do things and what are the stories behind there. I think we touched on it a little bit last week. That seems to me to be a very powerful that can do it. And I was speaking to a bunch of guys this week on a panel, and you could tell the difference between those people who could understand why that really made a difference, and why people wanted to engage two ways, both ways with companies before they agreed to work for them, and those that were stuck in a very old-fashioned mindset.
So let's now hear from Pat Lyons. Pat set up a business, Sullivan and Stanley, about a year ago, and one of the key things that he's doing is to be able to use networks to be able to help his clients and the people that might work through him to be able to find each other in many ways. And again, this idea of open networks comes through quite strongly. I started off by asking Pat a bit about what he's been doing in the year since he set up the company.
I suppose it was all born out of curiosity around where the market was going, where organisations are going, where the future of work's going, where general transformation is going, whether it's kind of political, human, business, social. It really feels like in the last 2 or 3 years there's been a real seismic shift in the way that my industry operates. So, to give you a few examples, early on in my career, it was, the norm to be able to get some airtime with the board or get airtime with the senior sponsor and really discuss at the front end what is it that they're looking to achieve, what does good look like, what is the resource plan, what type of behavioural and cultural alignment or countercultural alignment would they be looking for, which at the back end of giving up that front end time ensured that you'd have anywhere between a kind of a 90 to 95% hit rate of the people that you put into that organisation. And in the last 2 or 3 years, it really felt that kind of personalised service, especially in my end of the technology and change recruitment market, interim or senior contract knowledge workers, the glue around those interims, was coming under attack a bit. Whether it was from the rise of procurement, the rise of recruitment process outsourcers. It feels like some certain members of the board are really making decisions on cost, which I believe is only one half of the equation, which is value being the other side, which made me kind of feel like what could be the future. What is there that the market wants that it doesn't have at the moment. So just went out and reached out to my network. Obviously over 15 years I've always taken a kind of a long view on relationships, and just started being quite inquisitive and asking loads of open-ended questions about what do you like about the industry, what don't you like about the industry, what do you see as the key problems, what frustrates you, what do you think's the future. And that was intersecting with my thoughts around where did I want my career to go. My last business was a fabulous business. I still miss it now, some of it. Built 2 great leadership teams there. I really feel that I was a part of LaFoste's success and their journey. So it was with a heavy heart that I left. But when you have that real gut feeling that you've got something else in you that's a bit more robust for where the market's going, you've got to follow your intuition. So over 18 months of going out and meeting people like yourself, I decided that what was in my head and what I'd put into a loose business plan needed 100% of my time to develop into a model that I've been bringing to the market this year under my new journey, which is Sullivan and Stanley.
So what were the sorts of things that people were telling you that they saw as needing to change within the industry?
A number of things, but I think the proliferation of management consultancies and consulting firms I think has caused widespread consulting fatigue in the market. And I think the other side was some of my interim executives that are parachuted into organisations to either remediate or create new and deliver or bolster a particular transformation were getting really frustrated about the sourcing models that they were allowed to use, i.e. incumbent recruitment process outsourcer or incumbent agencies that weren't able to deliver the quality of talent they needed to deliver and sustain change. Because I think the new world needs a new different skill set, which is difficult to vet in candidates, because I quite like what Katrina said earlier, is that people will judge on past performance, not on what they're likely to do in the future, which I'm a big believer on. And I think most people will hire on past performance and the interview performance rather on what they can do in the future. So they'll hire on hard skills and interview performance, but fire on soft skills. So I think that there needs to be a new way of vetting change workers and individuals as well.
That's interesting, because Katrina talks about this idea of recruitment in the age of transparency, and a lot of the things that you described then seem to me to be about procurement processes reigning supreme and about cost management of the recruitment process, which is a certain sort of transparency, this transparency of balance sheet, and that actually what people looking for, skills, talent, experience, are actually needing to get to is being blocked in a way by these corporate governance measures.
Correct. Yeah. Because it's a really good point, actually. Because if you think of what I do, what I have done, depending on who you ask, it's contract recruitment, interim recruitment, heads, body shopping. So that falls under a different cost bracket. And then what I've found over the years is that the organisation will get into a certain amount of duress, or there'll be slippage in programmes. So then they'll outsource to consulting firms, because traditionally they can hide the cost below the line. So that's where I've seen the real frustration in the market, has been with proliferation of consulting firms, where we're seeing someone like the Big Four and Big Ten are just body shopping, where traditionally they did strategy.
Yeah, it's something I've seen a lot in a number of organisations over the last few years. It's a way to be able to shift it onto a different budget.
Yeah, and I get it. It's just my old world was very much seen as it's contract recruitment, it's interim recruitment, it's body shopping, it's heads, and I worry for that industry in the longer term.
So you're now working with a sort of hybrid model. Some of the work that you do is about being able to put people with skills into roles, but then you're also creating teams of people to be able to address specific business needs for your clients?
Yeah, correct.
How does that manifest itself, that new approach to it?
Yeah, so I suppose it's taken me 15 years to get to where I am, in this year, but some of my earlier career, I was the guy who sat behind a bench. So I was one of the key recruiters for Dimension Data, Alcatel-Lucent, some of the kind of mid-sized Cisco Gold partners when I set up the telecoms division from Harvey Nash. And it always kind of intrigued me, even back then, that when you try and, for instance, sell into Vodafone, you'd be put onto a PSL list of 9%, 8%. Whereby if you went through a consulting firm like Bluefish, for instance, you could put people in at 15%. So I've always been really intrigued about different ways of putting people into organisations. And what I've found is, especially with recent times, I feel that there's a gap in the market. So if you look at the left-hand side, if we call that the agency world, there's so many of them now in the race to the bottom. It's a real commodity area and it's difficult to differentiate yourself. And then if you say on the right-hand side, you've got consulting firms. So they're usually the two ecosystems that would populate a change program, whether it's put in the leader or put in the knowledge workers. I've always been quite curious about wondering about what would a hybrid model look like, which would be the best of top 5% recruiters, which I think are worth their weight in gold. They can build great communities. They can, recruit, key individuals into organisations to make a difference, and inherently they're really good at sales. And then you look at some of the best of the interim world, which by very nature are, top 5, top percent kind of change agents, leaders, board members, where, they can deliver, if you like it, kind of micro consulting to organisations that's trusted. They don't have an axe to grind, they're loyal to you, there's no pyramid pressure, and actually they can tell you the truth, in a supportive way. So I was wondering whether there was a world where, top 5% recruiters and top 5% interim leaders and change agents intersect together to form a crowd which can deliver, trusted consulting to organisations. And since change is now the new norm, I feel, potentially it could be, a bit of a sweet spot in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's why I've kind of moved away to, create a challenger brand this year.
And you're putting quite a lot of focus into building a community of people that you then have the potential to form together into these teams. What are the sorts of things you're doing to do that?
Well, I think, there's probably 3 pillars to it. I think the first one is personalised service. So if we look at each individual matters. So it's making sure that the relationship's the currency, and that there's value between both parties, and you're really getting to know the individual, what they like, what they don't like, what their sweet spot is, what relationship they want with their career, how can you help them, and seeing if they fit the criteria for the virtual consulting pool that I'm delivering. Now, if that's a fit for both parties, then invite them into a community, which the second and third pillar would be an online community where people can interact and share knowledge and be part of a valued network, a valued crowd. And then offline, which is events, not just your kind of traditional board round table events that I've put on together in spades in the past, but events that kind of are quite spontaneous, like flash mob events, which are decided by the crowd rather than a sales guy saying, I think we should, debate digital transformation or the future of work, who's interested, rather than putting it to the crowd and saying, well, we've got a spot here in this location, what would everyone like to discuss? And I'm finding that actually you get a bit of a flash mob effect, which has been quite interesting, and it's really enjoyable as well. So I've made a conscious decision to try and outsource as much of my back office as possible. So the inner core is lean and forward facing and completely relationship driven. Because for me, one of the hallmarks of this business and me is a personalised service on relationships, which is where most of my business decisions will be born out of.
And so that's for in old language, the candidates, the people with the skills and the talents. What are you doing on the client side?
Well, on the client side, what I'm finding is that both of them are existing in the same community. And what I'm finding is, if we looked at some of the problems that I mentioned, some of them earlier, I think one of the bigger problems in, especially the corporate world, is a lack of strategic alignment. And on the client side, what I'm doing is offering a bespoke kind of workshop as a service type solution for clients to come in to this workshop room that you're in now, and whiteboard problems with my network. And what I'm finding is that over a period of time that chemistry is happening between those pods to go in and deliver actually some trusted outcomes for that key sponsor. So it's still personalised, but it's very much kind of a client consulting curation service.
So you're putting the people that they may work with the people who might want the work to be done, and getting them to start working together to work out whether there's a fit.
Correct.
Interesting.
So I think if I was going to think about the big light bulb moment that made me think I've got to do something different here. So I was at a Deloitte Deloitte session for recruitment board directors at the start of last year. And as you could imagine, I'd say all my peers out there in the market are probably thinking, how do we pivot? What should we do next? Where is disintermediation coming for our respective business models or model? So it was a real hot topic. And this lady closed off the session by saying, if I was in your shoes, I'd be thinking about two things as business owners, as directors, board directors of your respective recruitment organisations. First one is, if you're not in the board's business plan, you could potentially struggle. So think about how you can pivot into an organisation's business plan. And the second thing is relentlessly explore how much value you can build around the process and delivery that you give to an organisation. Which for me, I just thought, so I mean that's it. They're the two things. So what I found, obviously the first 6 months of this journey was very cold because I had a non-compete. So I was hustling for business, but as I've started to get some traction with this new model, what I found is, because it's at the start it's about strategic alignment, invariably you're in at the board and you're having conversations pre-business case, which is a nice place to be.
Interesting. So something that I spoke with Katrina about as well, that the recruitment industry has traditionally been about networks, but it's been about closed networks. And Katrina's looking at it from a different perspective, which is to say, why do you need to have middlemen involved in this? Because you can build those networks yourselves. You're again putting a different spin onto it, which is about saying actually the network is the thing that is of value that will enable these connections to happen. But if I open that up to the people in the network, there's more chance of them being able to find where the work is almost.
Correct.
And then the traditional recruitment industry is, we've got a black book and we'll pretend that LinkedIn doesn't exist, and we'll pretend that social networks doesn't exist, and still in that mindset of a closed network. How do you see that panning out over the next few years? What do you think is going to happen to the traditional recruitment businesses?
I really liked a lot of what Katrina said about social recruitment. I think that's definitely got a role to play. Absolutely, developers are in GitHub and Stack Overflow, so I think there's definitely more access for internal recruiters and organisations to start building internal functions, and I think that will invariably eat away at the contingent permanent market for the independent agency. If I look at Burberry as an example, one of the best clients I've ever partnered with. I mean, what a great brand. I mean, every person I ever put into that organisation, they accepted the offer because such presence, such heritage in the brand. But back in 2010, I put in a transformation director and then an interim team underneath that transformation director, and then some senior knowledge workers under each individual of that leadership team. To deliver some board outcomes. Very successful, a really nice piece of work. And then what I found was, after that piece of work, I noticed as the years ticked by, all of a sudden they'd created a search function internally, they'd created an internal permanent recruitment function, and was starting to then incentivise the staff internally to open up their networks to find contractors. So if an organisation that's as forward thinking as Burberry are starting to do it, it's not going to be long before some other organisations start to do it, and we can already see that in spades happening at the moment. Which the service that Katrina offers, as you can see, is in demand. So that's why my paradigm has shifted from the individual, from PSLs, from signing up to RPOs and sitting behind them, to teams and trusted consulting for board members and their direct reports. Because there's value in that. There's value in that curation service, and I'm hoping, and I think that will get this organisation ahead of the curve. Because I think the world that I've just left in 5 years' time will either be all hoovered up by the likes of Capita and Manpower and Allegis, or will just be kind of micro niche agencies that will be following technology trends, which I think there'll always be a space for those.
So a very opposite chat there, and a lot of stuff coming out that was related to what Katrina said, but also related to some of the things that we've been talking about last week with the social CIO. I particularly liked the way that Pat, how people hire on hard skills and fire on soft skills. I think that is a trend that sometimes people miss.
Yeah, and this idea again of how the network and the open network is going to be so important going forward for the ability for people to find the right skills and talent that they need at all sorts of levels within organisations to be able to get stuff done. I think that's really, really challenging for the traditional recruitment mindset, because the traditional recruitment mindset was my black book, my Rolodex, my contacts. I've heard of people when leaving recruitment companies having to delete contacts that they have on LinkedIn that they've amassed over the last X period because they were ones that were made when they were on that watch and not on the new one. Just crazy ways of thinking that are trying to impose that old closed network model onto the way in which the reality of how things are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will disappear. It might not disappear in the next 2 years or 5 years, but it will.
So that's it for this week. Some fascinating insight. Hopefully that's got you thinking about how you might go about finding skills for the work that you're doing, or how you might start to be able to put yourself out if you're looking to be able to find new avenues to be able to deploy your skills. We have got one more show of 2016. We're then going to take a bit of a Christmas break. But next week, we're going to do a bit of a review of the year. We're not quite sure how depressing that's going to be yet. There is a possibility at the end of it we could be all in tears. But we'll be, for our first couple of months, but giving a bit of a review of the whole year.
Looking forward to it. Can't wait.
So thanks for listening. That's it for another week. Join us again next week. You can subscribe to WB40 on iTunes. You can search for us. You can find us at WB40 podcast on Twitter, and WB40podcast.com for our website. We'll speak to you next week. Bye now.